Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We're back with another exciting GESS Talks webinar, and today's discussion is all about leading schools in the Middle East. We've got an amazing panel of school leaders that have got a wealth of experience doing so in the region, and you'll hear from them shortly. But first, I'd like to say a big thank you to our webinar sponsor, Kinderpedia. Kinderpedia is an all-in-one digital solution for school management and communication. It helps schools and childcare centers simplify their administrative and financial flows, save time, and foster a dynamic communication between students, teachers, and parents. Trusted by more than 2,000 schools and nurseries in 25 countries, Kinderpedia offers tailored solutions to the most common digital challenges of any education institution: school management, classroom management, student progress tracking, family engagement, and school financial management. A few bits of information before we get underway. For all attendees, you can find the control panel on the side. There's a Q&A tab and another one for handouts. You can browse and download the files at any time during the webinar. Please feel free to use the Q&A, ask us questions, as the panelists would love to hear your thoughts. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our chair and moderator and a longtime supporter and friend of GESS, Dr. Helen Wright, the International Education Advisor and a Director of Global Thought Leadership, to introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Helen.
Thank you very much indeed, Danny. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here on this and chairing this webinar. And of course, we're going to be talking about being a school leader in the Middle East. And the Middle East is a very broad term. In fact, we have leaders here from 3 distinct cultures in the Middle East who are going to talk a little bit about themselves, and hopefully we'll have an interesting discussion as we explore what it's really like to be a leader, a school leader in the Middle East. So I'm going to welcome our panelists and ask them to just say very briefly where they've come from. And I've, as Danny said, my background, I was a school head, and I now am an international education advisor, coach, and I work and recruit a lot of leaders in the Middle East specifically. But Tracy, over to you. You have an exciting role too.
I do. I'm the executive principal of a brand new school that's been going, well, we're obviously in 3rd term. So this is our term 3, Citizens School in the middle of Dubai, literally in the centre of Dubai, with quite a bespoke futures focused curriculum, which is integrated with the national curriculum of the UK, really focused on digital literacy, entrepreneurship, sustainability, a number of the kind of key areas that educators are working on at the moment. I've been here, this is 8 years for me, in a variety of leadership roles, and the last 3 schools have been founding schools for me.
So where you are at the moment, future focused, centre of Dubai, and you'll have a lot to share about leadership, I'm sure, particularly in those founding startup schools. Vanessa, you're in Qatar.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm the principal of Durham School for Girls in Qatar. We've been open this is our 4th year now. We opened in 2019 with just primary. We opened with over 500 primary girls. And then over the course of the pandemic, we recruited another 600 secondary girls online and through the pandemic and things like that. And we now stand at just over 1,200 girls all the way up to year 12. We were the first British all-girls school here in Qatar. And I think that made a difference. And we're actually got 98% Qatari nationals. So it gives us a very different feeling to the other British schools in Doha, and also some of them in the Middle East as well. Being part of the BSME, it's been very interesting, when people say, oh, yes, that's the British curriculum of, but Vanessa, remember, you've got Qataris, and that sort of thing, which is lovely. But it's been a huge roller coaster and an amazing journey to see the school from the construction all the way through now to full capacity. So it's been great, and thank you for having me here today.
Well, no, it's great, and you'll have a lot to share, and particularly also perhaps about the links back to the UK school.
That's right, yes.
Durham school there. Tracy, I'm going to go on to Kai in just a second, but Vanessa mentioned that her school is part of BSME, the British Schools of the Middle East. You are a member of BSME, or you have a different curriculum? Just
we're the British national curriculum, but as a new starter, we're actually building towards our accreditations now.
Yes.
So we will be looking to do all of those things. Absolutely.
Yeah. So BSME is an important organisation and a sign of well, it's accreditation, really, isn't it, in many ways? And of course, Kai, British School of Muscat, is an important member of BSME too. So just do introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me on to the webinar today. Kai Vacher, I still am, like to think of myself, a teacher and an assistant head in 2 state schools in South England before coming out to the Middle East. I also worked for a large school improvement charity. So I had nearly a quarter of a century in the state system in England. Then came out here in 2011. So I've been principal of British School Muscat since 2011, and since 2019, I've also been principal of the other well-established not-for-profit British school in Oman. That's British School Salalah, which is just 1,000 kilometres down the road. Literally, and I'm not joking there. If you don't know the geography of Oman, I could take you to a sign just outside the school which says Salalah 999 kilometres. So that's where the other school I'm responsible for. So that's since 2019, and delighted to have been able to have this experience for more than a decade, enjoying being a principal, a school leader, and living in Oman, and also learning a lot about life and education in the Middle East. It's been a fantastic experience so far.
And so, of course, all three of you are kind of really at the almost like the top of the leadership tree, but there are lots of different leaders within a school. I mean, Kai, looking at your school for a moment, the British School of Muscat, it's in Oman. It's a very well regarded school, very well established. Now, of course, you've got British School of Salalah as well. What do you think is really needed of leaders generally in your school, a school like yours in the Middle East?
Well, I think the first thing is, I guess, a lot of our colleagues, this is not home for them. It's not home territory in terms of their country. We do have a number of Omani staff, but pretty much all our teachers are UK or UK trained. So when a colleague comes out to join us, whether it's in Salalah or Muscat, they are a long way from home, like many of our students and their families. So I do feel, and I guess have experienced over the last decade or so, that the responsibility you have as a principal of an international school with a large number of, let's say, international students, but also a large number of expatriate colleagues is possibly your pastoral responsibility for your colleagues as well as your students is probably even more than it might be in the UK, where people turn up to school, they go home, and you might not see them at any other point. So I think, what is needed, first of all, I think you do need to be very supportive to your colleagues from the moment you've appointed them, or even before that, and make them feel welcome, feel at home. So it's not just about, if like, inducting them and introduce them into the school, but also into the community and into the country, which for many people will be very different. So I think that we need to be supportive, and going along that, we need to be empathetic, to be supportive in the right way, and we need to be compassionate. And we all have lives outside of school, and there will be times when our colleagues, like ourselves, will have things going in our lives, which means we might have to spend some time away from school. And that might mean you've got to travel 4,000 miles back to the UK, or maybe to the side of the world, to New Zealand, and trying to be as supportive, empathetic, compassionate as we can be, and at the same time bearing in mind that we're all doing a job here for our children, our students, our community. Balancing that can be tricky at times. So I think those are really important qualities. And then I could add to that I think, certainly here in Amman at the two schools, we have a very diverse staff. We have a very diverse community, and there will be lots of different views about what is the right way to provide education for a child at a certain point. And so I think being responsive, being able to listen to stakeholders right across the community and generally listen to concerns and aspirations and what different stakeholders are looking for from the school, and then trying as far as possible to find win-win solutions and being very creative in that, then I think we do spend a lot of time investing in listening to our students, listening to our colleagues, listening to our parents, our governors, and trying to, out of those multiple perspectives, bring solutions which provide really high quality education experiences for the children here. So I think the two things, at least, I think, being very supportive, empathetic, compassionate, but also being very listening, having a very listening approach with our school community.
Thank you. And you mentioned that being creative as well and finding creative solutions. And I'm sure that Tracy, that must be something that particularly resonates with you in terms of the startup, the founding nature. It just gives a little bit more of an insight into citizens and what kind of leaders you think thrive at your school.
For me, every teacher is a leader. So right the way through the school, one of the things that we want to really inculcate, if you like, in terms of our DNA, is that every teacher is a leader and you are leading. And I think we also want that for our students. So in terms of high student agency and looking at the high student engagement, having that first is really important in terms of what's happening both inside and outside of the classroom. Citizens is very, very lucky to have such an amazing, very innovative learning environments. And I say environments plural, because what we want is not to have one teacher, one class, but a whole variety of educators with learners. We call our teachers mentors, so they mentor the students. We want to go into that kind of frame of mind and move away very much from the kind of traditional roles of this person's in charge of learning and knowledge and classroom, and these are the recipients of that. So what we're trying to do is really turn that on its head and have students who are leaders of learning as well. And that's a real sea change. And I think, again, my colleagues will want to be doing the same thing and have done the same thing, I'm sure. But I mean, picking up on Kai's note, I think well-being now, absolutely rightly, is at the forefront of what we do. And we actually have our well-being sessions with students. That's part of our curriculum, that we ensure that that's really important and at the very forefront and core of the curriculum, but also for staff. So that opportunity to be part of well-being, as Kai said, in another country and not at home, having a family environment within the school is really important, I believe. The other thing I would say is that being very agile. I think school leaders now all over the world, and certainly not just here, but having to do a whole number of things and start predicting what needs to happen, changes in teaching practice, changes in curriculum, attitudinal changes, effective implementation of all sorts of initiatives that are absolutely needed if we're to prepare our students for a future that we're still learning about as we go.
And I can see, thank you, Tracy, I can see you nodding your head to that, Vanessa. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of us are in the same boat in terms of, leadership in that respect. And I take on board everything that Kai and Tracy have said and, duplicate that, a millionfold. I think for us as well, I think leadership, it's tough. And I think resilience has got to be one of the key things with leadership as well. And that goes back to well-being and feeling supportive and being able to take risks and knowing that, you're making those choices, and sometimes you are going to win and sometimes you're not going to win. But I think resilience is something that is super important in leadership, because the concept of leadership is very glamorous. I can lead this and I can run this project, but the actual reality of it is that's only a part of it, and you actually do get a lot of grief. Sometimes you are the one that has to make the difficult calls. You are the one that has to make difficult decisions. And leadership isn't always about doing the right thing and being the most popular. You know, or Tracy and Kai, I'm sure will agree with me. You know, it's a tough job. And we want our new leaders, be it the children or be it staff, to be able to take those risks, to be able to make those mistakes, but also know that somebody's got their back, know that they are supported, because that's how you learn to be a good leader. I think teachers naturally are very good managers because we're all super organized, you know, and we're very bossy and very efficient, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good leader. But you can only be a good leader if you know that as us as principals have got your back and are developing you, that, you know, when the chips are down, we will be the ones that step in, you know. So I think resilience links really with everything that we've been saying.
So here's a question for you, Vanessa. You know, what drew you to be a school leader, and a school leader in the Middle East in particular? Now, maybe more than one stage to that, but what was it that took you down that route, and why end up in the Middle East, in Qatar in particular, maybe?
I mean, for me, becoming a leader was not anything, as most people I think you talk to, I was never inspired to be a head teacher. I never inspired to be a principal, but I was loud and bossy and I liked making decisions. And so, you know, when an opportunity came by, I was voted in by default, actually, overnight, and suddenly went into school one day and then became acting elementary dean through default that had been made by the governors that evening. And from that, I began to realize I liked it. And actually, I thought I was quite good at it. And people told me I was okay at it. So that's how I went into leadership, really, through default. But in terms of becoming a leader in the Middle East, I was a founding principal in Panama. I've opened the British School of Panama. And I'd also done 2 other founding schools as well. And so there is a niche, there is a different type of leadership that you have with a founding school. And I'm sure that, you know, Kai, you've got that experience, and Tracy definitely is nodding there, because it's a very different market when you're creating everything from scratch, you know. And I love that. I actually love that complete chaos and that, you know, seeing something develop and evolve. And in terms of the Middle East, it wasn't on my radar, but I got contacted by Durham, UK, and I just fell in love with this concept of becoming a leader of girls in a Middle Eastern country. You know, we knew that Durham School for Girls was going to be fundamentally Qatari, you know, in its nature. We didn't expect it to be 99%, but to be able to have that opportunity to create change and to be able to lead something so unique was a complete dream.
And you've mentioned that it's, you know, largely Qatari. What difference does that make, do you think, being a leader in a school like that, or are they just simply all children?
They are all children. I think the girls, children are children, wherever you are. I've worked in international schools with, you know, 80 different nationalities in one school. And I've worked in schools where we've got predominantly the nation children in their school. And children are children. You know, we've got, whether our girls are Qatari or not, they're teenage girls. They scream, they giggle, you know, she looked at me funny. All of those different things happen regardless of where you are in the world, regardless of religion and regardless of culture. I think the difference is the aspect of our school with the parents, having all of the parents being Qatari, and the reputation that we have in the community, in the respect that, you know, we're a British school, but we have to adapt what we're doing and what we're saying and how we're doing that, because our clientele is Qatari, you know, and that's something that is fundamental with training my teachers and training the leaders within our school. Because what you could do in an international school, or what you could do in a British school, we can't do here, you know. And what would seem quite trivial in other international schools isn't trivial here, because we're talking about the reputation of young Muslim women, you know. And so, you know, when somebody says something, oh, I put a photo on social media, yes, it's an issue and we all have to deal with that, and we've been there and done it. But when that photo is of a teenage girl uncovered, you know, that has huge implications and huge reputational damage. So it is different in that respect. And I think the Middle East, all of us have to take into consideration that, regardless of the clientele that we have. But children are children, you know, and girls are girls at the end of the day.
I could see you nodding vigorously, Tracy, to that. And I was wondering about your journey. What made you a leader, and a leader in the Middle East in particular? What keeps you in the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I literally have done, I think, every job in school, and I just worked my way up, and did all of those things, and thoroughly enjoyed teaching. Came into teaching from, believe it or not, social work, and I was actually an educator in a social work setting, and enjoyed it so much that I just moved across into teaching, and then started at a big college in Epping, and that's where I started my journey. I've actually spent more years now in Europe and in the Middle East than in the UK. So I've worked in a couple of countries in Europe, leading schools there, and again working my way up. And I think here in the Middle East, I think one of the attractions is it's a very inspirational and innovative, transformational environment. There's this continuous striving for improvement. There's not a day that you can kind of sit back and go, it's done. You are literally doing this all the time. So it's busy. It's never a dull moment. And I enjoy working with colleagues and looking for that, not only succession, but also the sweet spot of colleagues and building leaders within the team, because I think that's so important as well. So for me, yeah, just love teaching, love being in that environment, but actually have spent, I think, 20 years really looking at innovation and looking at new initiatives and building schools in that respect. So yeah, it's never a dull moment, and it's always interesting and exciting.
And Dubai has a lot of schools. And I mean, the UAE generally has a lot of schools, but Dubai in particular. What would you recommend people if they were thinking about becoming a leader in Dubai? Is there a particular route they need to take, or is it just that they could go to any school? Or, I mean, what's your sense of the landscape there for leaders?
Dubai is an incredible, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree. The competitive environment here in terms of education is huge. So schools, I think there were 15 schools opening this year in Dubai, and it seems to happen every year. There's another kind of clutch of new schools. I think if you are a leader in the UK or in any other country in Europe, and you are good at what you do, and you can adapt and be flexible and understand the areas that you need to take note of, like the kind of cultural context, and you're able to adapt in that respect, it's a fantastic environment to work in. And there's enough schools for everyone. There's enough diversity in terms of the curriculum. Everyone's opening with their own unique selling position. So you can find an Italian school, a Chinese school, a German school, a French school, a Swiss school, all doing ministry curricula of their own country, but also we do the ministry curricula of the UAE as well. So there's something for everyone here, I think, and everyone's got something to offer, I believe, in the Middle Eastern environment.
No, thank you. And Kai, before I ask you about your journey into leadership, some of which you've told us already, I mean, how would you distinguish Muscat and Oman, and Salalah as well, from Dubai, UAE, from Qatar, Doha, Qatar? How would you distinguish where you are?
Well, good question to ask a geographer. Firstly, you might have a long answer if you're not careful. First of all, when you fly into Muscat or Salalah, or anywhere else in Oman, there's not that many airports. What you'll find different to those other Gulf countries is we have no skyscrapers. And His Majesty Sultan Qaboos, who was Sultan here for nearly 50 years, from 1970 to early into 2020, he decreed that there'd be no building over 8 stories high. So that's why there's no skyscrapers. So not only will you see fairly low buildings as you fly in, but what also a lot of our teachers really like when they first arrive is they say there is geography here in Oman. So I look out in my window and there are trees with birds in, and then there are mountains just over there, and there's sea just over there. So Dubai, Qatar, Bahrain, They have the sea, but they don't have the mountains. So within the mountains, we have wadis, as well as the desert. We have 1,700 kilometers of coastline. So just geographically, there is a huge amount to enjoy and explore here. And in the holiday period, we do see a lot of teachers and expats that come down from other parts of the Gulf to enjoy the geography, which we're very fortunate enough to have here in Oman. So physically, it looks and feels very different. But I think what's also different as well is that, and because I've done quite a lot of traveling, partly with BSME and also COPES around the Middle East, so have got quite a lot of experience. So while Dubai, for maybe Abu Dhabi, Qatar, to an extent, they've got the bright lights, and a lot of my colleagues love going to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, other parts of the Gulf at weekends or during holidays for other things like shopping malls and hotels and that sort of thing. What we have here, in addition to the geography, we also have a majority Omani population who are incredibly friendly, and they are lovely people to work alongside, to interact with. If your car breaks down in the middle of the desert, you won't be there for very long. Sooner or later, an Omani will come along, or several Omanis will come along, and they'll come and help you out. So there's a wonderful community here to be part of in terms of the Omanis, but also there is a lot of Omani and Arabic culture and history, whether we're talking about forts, watchtowers, museums, ruins. There's a huge amount of culture and history to explore in Oman. So I might be standing a bit like the Omani tourism agency here, but where Oman is trying to position itself in the market is very much around, if you want a really genuine Arabic experience, then Oman is probably a pretty good place to go to in the Middle East at the moment.
And what do you enjoy most about being a school leader? What took you to the Middle East in particular, but also what do you enjoy most now about being where you are?
What took me to the Middle East? I guess I for a long time I was intrigued about what it would be like to actually live and work in another country rather than just go on holiday. And so I was actually, when I was working for the School Improvement Charity, I was involved in a conference in Abu Dhabi, and one of the conference organisers, he'd been spending 2 or 3 years in Abu Dhabi. He said it wasn't actually Abu Dhabi, it was Al Ain, and he pointed to some mountains in the distance. And he says, Kai, beyond those mountains is a magical place called Muscat. And if you ever get the chance, you should go there. And 2 years later, when I was looking to move on from the School Improvement Charity, and I was interested in overseas postings, and one of these recruitment agents called me up and said, British School Muscat, Oman, Kai, would you be interested? And I thought, that's that magical place over the other side of those mountains. I better go and explore that one. So that was part of the attraction. But I guess what I really enjoy is lots of things really. But I'm very fortunate in Oman, in British School Muscat and British School Salalah. We were set up with a royal charter granted by His Majesty back in 1973, and that royal charter gives both our schools a huge amount of autonomy. So I have nothing on my desk or in my inbox from Ofsted. I do have a BSO inspection report that I just need to review, but I have very little directive from the Ministry of Education, who we have a very constructive relationship with. I have very few people, if like outside the school community, sort of telling me what to do or directing me what to do. And so that autonomy, which the Royal Charter gives us, I feel very privileged to be operating in those conditions. But that doesn't mean it's easy, and there's still a huge amount of accountability. But it's very much, myself, the leadership team are accountable to the governing body who come from the local community, and they and we are very much accountable to our local community. And I actually think that's how it should be, ideally in a school, that you serve a community and you're accountable to that community. And so, we're out there on the front gate every morning, every afternoon. We're very open and accessible to our parents and to our students, to our colleagues. And if there's something they feel is not right, they'll tell us about it. And obviously we'll listen and we'll see if we can do something about it. So that, I guess, that sense of autonomy and serving a very international and diverse community, I find very enriching. And I guess someone who's got quite when I'm in a UK context, I'm quite unusual because my name's Kai. Where does that come from? My British friends or colleagues have said, and Vacher is French. So I'm this sort of European hybrid. So when I was growing up, I felt quite unusual. Whereas in this environment, I actually feel I blend in terms of my own personal background, just like everybody else, because everybody here, especially the students and the families that we serve, have a very diverse, sort of very mixed background. So I do feel very much a part of that. And so I think Mahatma Gandhi said that the definition of happiness is when what you think and what you think and what you say and what you do are all aligned. Yeah. And I'd say most days what I'm thinking and what I'm saying and what I'm doing are aligned. And that sort of simple definition of well-being or happiness, that's something that I think I can live out here. And I probably would have struggled if I'd have been a head teacher in the UK, because there are issues, certainly in the state system and in the independent system in the UK, that philosophically I would struggle with at times if I was a school leader. Whereas here, with this autonomy, serving this wonderful international community in a wonderful country, it's hard to think of, would there be a better job anywhere else in the world of being a school leader in this environment?
Thank you. And Tracy, does that resonate with you? What do you enjoy most about your role in your school in the Middle East?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, we do have the regulator, we do have the inspections, but from my perspective, they are really wholly supportive. We know what we're doing, we know what we need to do. I think with startup schools, you have time to actually embed some of the new initiatives that you might be rolling out. So you get that time to actually embed them before the regulator comes in and starts to do those kind of inspections, if you like, and that happens here every year. So it's quite an interesting environment. Again, keeps you on your toes, keeps you busy, keeps you there. So for me, it keeps you really sharp. So you're always on it and you're always thinking about, okay, I need to be able to roll that out, or that hasn't worked and I need to do something else. And I think everyone in the school enjoys autonomy and the ability to take risks at the moment, because we're in that kind of honeymoon period of the first kind of 2-3 years of a new school. So we're trying things out, and now's the time to do those things so that they can become part of the school's DNA, and not necessarily the same thing that the school down the road is doing. They're not the same thing as the school down the road is doing. So I think for us, the way that the inspections happen is actually enables everyone to have their own identity and to do the things that they feel is right. And like Kai, I feel very privileged to be in the Middle East and to have worked here for the 8 years I've been here, and in a variety of different schools, from very international populations to, schools that are wholly Emirati, and they all offer something wonderful to a school leader from my perspective. So it's a win-win from me.
And you said something there about this innovation, about doing things, new things. And your school, Citizens, is a bit of a watchword at the moment for innovation, certainly around Dubai. Equally, so is Dubai, and actually by extension, the UAE, the Middle East as a whole, is a sort of a hotbed of innovation and development. I mean, what do you see are the trends coming out of that point to the direction of the future?
So from our perspective, we're we're new school, as Vanessa pointed out. You're doing everything from scratch. We're building the ship, and it's probably a spaceship now. It's not a sailing ship. While we're traveling in it, but we're also redesigning it as we go. So we're kind of doing a number of design, iteration, reviewing, doing it again. We did a survey, actually, Citizens did a survey, an extensive survey of parents, adults in Dubai. And interestingly, obviously, from their perspective, creative thinking, mental well-being, confidence, and digital literacy were the 4 things that the parents really wanted schools to be working on and to be educating students on. We have a number of areas that we're looking at. And we're not there yet. We're a new school, so we're founding, we're doing all the things that we need to do, but at the same time, we've got an eye on robotics, we're using some AI, we're looking at how we might use the metaverse and what that looks like in terms of an educational setting. The school has built its own 3D metaverse at the moment. And so it's really touching the future. And I think with everything that we see happening in education, and Kai, people will have seen, had put something on about chat recently, and some of the AI tools that really we can utilize in education. But these things are brand new, and we're actually learning about them as we go. And so there's a gap between where we are as educators, I believe, and capacity building with the team, and in terms of where we need to be in order to utilize what's there now and be able to enhance the students' experiences of it. So there's that really interesting tension about, we've done it like this and it's worked, but now we need to start thinking about, well, what does it look like? We're in the future now. So what does it look like now? And what does it look like in the next 10 years, the next 5 years, next year, next week? Because, there's 200 odd different bits of software and AI solutions that are coming out constantly. So this is constant disruption, I think, that we feel and want to take note of. And it's looking at, what do our students need? How can we empower them to navigate what is incredibly complex areas? It's not just about our education now, it's about those real and virtual worlds that the students are part of. And how do we bring that in and make it part of a really authentic and relevant educational experience? And the answer is, it's not easy. And it takes work every day.
And I'm sure Vanessa and Kai will have thoughts as well about the future direction of education in the Middle East and beyond. And so I want to ask both of you that question. And in particular, also, how do you help leaders develop so that they are up for that? Tracy talked about that almost like a gap, you constantly moving forward, so you've constantly got to be developing leaders. So Kai, what do you see as the future, and how do you help, either in your school or beyond, leaders develop to prepare for it?
Yeah, well, we could talk about this for hours, but I mean, I am absolutely fascinated about what's coming up in the next sort of 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 100 years for our young people, and what is the future that we are preparing them for? Because there's a lot of unknowns there. So I think that's one of the sort of the first questions is, what should we be teaching? And I guess for me, I do think this is a time where we should be, as school leaders, as educators in school systems, I think, to help us through this I agree with Tracy, I think it's going to be very disruptive for quite a while. And, when you're sailing a ship through a difficult storm, it helps to know where your bearings are. It needs to know where you're going, that you're grounded, you've got a keel, and you know where the North Star is, and so that helps you plow through. Yeah. And I think what I think we need to do is we need to go back to the I think quite a tricky question, but a really important question about what is the purpose of education. Yeah. Because again, I think we all come from the UK. If you look at schools in the UK, you would think that the purpose of many schools in the UK was to get an outstanding Ofsted grading. Well, certainly until quite recently, anyway. If you ask the school what its vision was, well, we're going to be outstanding or we're going to be good, and that's just something which has emerged in the last 10 years, and I think that's really sad. That the vision for any school is an inspection grading. That is. If we're in that place, education's in a bad place, I think. Yeah. And if for young people, education is only about exams and getting through exams, I also think that's very sad too. And so I think we should be having a debate. And I think the discussion around well-being is actually, for me, taking us to that place. Because for me, well-being isn't just about, and though this is very important, how we, if you like, put the sticking plaster on today or help the student or the member of staff today or tomorrow, isn't well-being about, what is the purpose of education learning? Clearly, you'd have hoped, but what is the purpose of that learning? And isn't the purpose of any learning in school ultimately that our young people can live successful, fulfilling lives where they are happy? And we can have a lot of discussion about what that happy looks like or what that means. But I think we really need to have this discussion that education is, what is the purpose of it? Because then when we've got 8 million apps coming, to decide, or lots of different situations that we've got to try and work our way through, if we've got a very clear moral purpose for what we're trying to do, that will help us navigate through pretty much anything. So I do think we need that debate. But on the second point, I do think clearly technology is becoming more and more of a thing. I mean, just as I was leaving school as a student, we had one ZX computer turn up in school. That was technology in schools. We have a computer in our school. This is 1983. Now, and actually for quite a long time, it was how many more computers can you have in school? And can you have one-to-one and all that? Now, and I'm drawing on I think the wonderful work that Philippa Wraithmel has collected in her book, The Digital Ecosystem.
Yes.
If you've not read it, I really encourage you to check it out.
Great book.
Because it's a wonderful book. And it's really got me thinking. And she talks about our schools being digital ecosystems, because they are now. There is so much technology in our schools. And I think we really need to be thinking about how we lead and manage all this technology in a way that it is a supportive ecosystem for the growth of our young people and the growth of our colleagues and our community. And this ecosystem, like any ecosystem, is changing rapidly all the time. And this year, I have never known technology progress so rapid. Every month, there's something different happening with AI. And so having an ecosystem which can support those rapid changes in a way that positively supports our young people and supports our colleagues, support those young people, how we manage that, I think, is a real challenge. But I also think it's a really exciting opportunity, because I do believe this is going to disrupt and take education into a different, and if we get it right, a much better place.
Yeah.
So the question, therefore, Vanessa, is how do you develop leaders to be able to come into this digital ecosystem? And what are your thoughts around that? And what capacity do you have to do that? What possibility do you have to do that within your context and the wider context of the region?
Well, I think we're in the heart of where everything is developing. So, we're at the forefront in that respect, which is fantastic. I think everything that Tracy said and Kai said are so important. It's changing so rapidly that we're never going to be ready. Do you know what I mean? And I think that if you're trying to be ready or ahead of the game, it's never going to happen. My team do call me the dinosaur, because by the time I've learned how to do one thing, we're 10 phases ahead, but as long as I've got my ICT team on speed dial, I'm absolutely fine. But, we're never going to be finished with this. This is constant. This is constantly evolving. This is constantly happening. So I think, we've got to make leaders adaptable. We've got to make leaders, ready to think, okay, this is today. And as Tracy said, it's changing tomorrow. So what we learned today, actually, we've got to encompass a new thing tomorrow. But going back to what Kai said, I think the most important thing, and the thing that we all learned really from COVID, was the fact that those basic communication, human interaction, the human skills, be it well-being, be it, face-to-face emotional resilience, all of those different things, we've got to make sure that we've got that cemented. In Durham School for Girls, one of our big principles is our values and our core values, and it doesn't matter what technology we're using, those core values have got to remain constant, because that is what's going to build the future. Technology is always going to change, but your values, as Kai, you very rightly said, your moral compass, is the thing that is going to support this, you know, and be able for it to function and evolve, because it can get carried away, you know. But at the end of the day, we are dealing with technology, we are dealing with an unknown future, we are dealing with all of these variables, but we're also dealing with humans, you know, and our product is human, you know, and, you know, we've got to be able to make sure that those people are the future generation, have those morals, have that right North Star that they're following, you know, have those skills in order to lead that for the next generation. You know, it's all very well being able to, you know, program this and program that and everything. But, you know, for the future, we need to be able to have successful relationships. We need to be able to have good parental skills. We need to be able to have good leadership skills in order to develop those, you know. So I think we're in a very turmoil, you know, situation at the moment, but we can get so carried away with what could happen that we actually do need to go back to basics to sometimes, and, you know, refocus where we are, refocus our North Star, you know, and say what are our grounding values in order to deal with all of this technology.
So I'll tell you what's emerging from. Oh, Tracy, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I think the schools do that very well. I think they are always mindful of
absolutely
relationships. Everything runs on communication and relationships, and maybe not in that order. But actually, I think we do humans and technology well. I think there's a gap at the moment, and I think we need to solve it. What is really positive for me, though, is it brings the learners and the mentors together, because many of our students have got really well-refined tech skills, and I've seen them showing the staff how to do X or Y or Z. And so that power relationship has changed. You know, at that moment, it's the learner who is leading the conversation. And so from my perspective, that's a really positive move. But that, I think, will happen more and more, because students are using the technologies, and what we should be doing is helping them to use them in the best possible way with the values that we know are important.
I think as teachers, we've always been facilitators, haven't we? And it's even more so now. You know, we're not the fountain of knowledge, we're the facilitator of where you can find knowledge, you know. And I think that staff have to be that role now. Facilitating has become even more important, because, as you say, the children are actually leading the staff on those sorts of things, you know, and, you know, where in the curriculum can't keep up with that. You know, the British National Curriculum can't keep up with that. No curriculum can keep up with that. You know, I can remember reading the curriculum a few years ago, and it was sort of like, you know, 11-year-olds designing a PowerPoint, or 11-year-olds designing programming, and you've got 3-year-olds that are doing that now. You know, we've had to move so quickly in order to address that. So I think you're absolutely right, Tracy, in that respect. You know, it's bridging that gap and changing the role of who is learning from whom.
And so what's emerging from this, and what I can hear emerging from this, is that actually being in the Middle East and being the kinds of schools in which you're in it's a really exciting place to be. And that's partly because of the groundedness, the tradition, the values, but also that opportunity for space, innovation, creativity, technology, and so on. I'm going to turn to a couple of questions now, because we've got about 10 minutes left, and there's an eclectic group of questions here. And there's one here that I thought I wanted to draw to your attention. And it says that the person's noticing that you all exude a deep sense of joy and optimism. And it seems that these two personal characteristics as school leaders in any school community cannot be underestimated. So would you agree about joy and optimism being essential for leaders? I mean, yes, Kai, what would you say?
I think there is a body of research, I think, which shows that the power of a leader who goes around their organisation, whether it's a school or any other organisation, just smiling, can have a big impact on how that community feels. And my daughter quite often reminds me of that. Dad, you need to smile. When I'm deep in thought, I'm not always smiling. But no, I think joy and optimism, I think those are key traits. And I think to be able to maintain that, I mean, one of we've talked about well-being, but as leaders, I think we probably all have to learn and probably continue to work at how we manage our own personal energy.
Yes.
And so that we can come into school every day with joy and optimism, because it's much easier to do that if you've slept well, ate well, maybe done a bit of exercise, or whatever it does, that whatever it is that helps you maintain your personal energy. And so I think that is absolutely sort of number one priority, because if we're not coming into work full of joy and optimism and are able to welcome that joy or that really serious issue or that unhappiness or whatever it is that we're going to have to deal with, if we can't meet that positively and with energy and with empathy and compassion, all those things that we need to do, then we're going to struggle, our colleagues are going to struggle, our schools are going to struggle. So being able to maintain joy and optimism is absolutely crucial, and it's not always easy, and at times it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
And also share that with the team. So where you have your SLT team, your middle leaders, actually being able to ensure that joy and that positivity is shared, and being able to be, I think, agile and resilient. Okay, we can work this out, whatever our ideas, and just be solution focused for problems that arise and be really positive about doing that. And yes, it's hard at times, Kai, totally agree. But actually everyone looks to you to do that. So it's important that you are that person.
Now, there's a question here which is saying that a lot of what you've been talking about, quite naturally, has been very general and about leadership. And this person's really interested to hear if you think there are any key challenges or priorities that are specific to school leaders in the Middle East. Now, in fact, we have spoken about some of that, because we've spoken about the values, the cultural values, also spoken about the type of regulatory, the different regulatory bodies. We've also spoken about the space and the different focus. So we have talked about some of those which are very specific to this region. But is there anything else that you can think of that are either a challenge or a priority that would be helpful for somebody who hasn't worked in the Middle East at all? What would you say to a leader who's thinking of that? Vanessa?
I think one of the things is the fact, I mean, Qatar is different. Oman and Dubai, we've got very different scenarios here, aspects of the Middle East. In Qatar, you're only Qatari if your father is Qatari. So even if you're born in Qatar, you're not Qatari. And so there's only 450,000 Qataris in a country with 2 million people. So everybody is an expat. Yeah. And, that is sometimes a challenging situation. Qataris in general are just amazing people. They are so welcoming, they are so friendly, they are so loyal, and they are so supportive. But at the end of the day, sometimes you're led into a false sense of security, and you are an expat, and you are in a culture that is very different possibly to the culture that you were raised in or have had experience in. And I think, coming to the Middle East as leaders, we all come with very open minds in the fact that we know that these are going to be challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges is also sometimes having to think, well, that's not my own personal belief, but I have to respect that because of the country that I've chosen to work in. Sure. I think that is something that, we all make a choice to come here. We all benefit from living in the Middle East and working in the Middle East, and the benefits are huge. But that's what I always say to my teachers. They say, oh, but I don't believe in that, and I shouldn't have to compromise. Well, yeah, you do, because you chose to come to a country that believes in A, B, and C. And whether you believe in A, B, and C is irrelevant. You have to respect that because that was your choice of coming to this country. And we have a choice as expats that we can come and we can go. But I think that is something that, people who are not used to the Middle East or coming to the Middle East, they have to respect that, and at the end of the day, there are, I think Dubai, Tracy, Dubai seems very open, and I've been to Dubai a lot, and it's much more open maybe than Oman and Qatar in that respect. But at the end of the day, there are fundamental values and there are lines that you do not cross, and you've got to appreciate that.
From a positive perspective, those things are, in my experience, are lesser than greater.
Absolutely, I completely agree. But they are things that you need to bear in mind.
absolutely. I would also say that the values are very much family values here in the Middle East, very much family oriented in terms of living. And yes, in different areas, Dubai has probably got that reputation for being, party. In reality, in the reality of the different schools that exist in Dubai, that generally isn't the case. There's the opportunity if you want to do that, but there's also the cultural excursions. All of those things still exist. I just think it's very lucky to be in a country like this.
And Kai, what would you say about Oman? Any particular challenges? Any particular priorities that you think people should be aware of?
Well, I think partly echoing what Vanessa and Tracy have just been saying, but I mean, we are guests. However much we get, however long we're here for, we are guests in countries where Islamic culture is the culture. And I think we have to respect that. And sometimes I have to remind some of my colleagues that they are in an Islamic country. And for example, part of the induction, you have to be a bit more mindful about what you wear. Certainly in certain environments, you have to think a little bit differently about alcohol. You have to think a little bit differently about what you can post on social media. So there's that sort of cultural side, which does, you do have to be mindful of that, being a guest in this culture. What is I think a huge positive, I have never felt more respected, and maybe this is a sad indictment on sort of education in the UK and how it's perceived, but I have never felt as respected as I do in Oman, and my teachers and all my staff are so respected by our community. So when you go out and you meet families in the supermarket or wherever, they are so respectful of you as educators, and the value placed on education and the respect that our community has for teachers and for education. It's wonderful, really, to feel such a sense of respect. So I think that's a massive positive. And so in terms of well-being and self-esteem, feeling valued by your community, sometimes to the point of celebrity status, which can get quite embarrassing. But we are, as teachers and as educators, and as quite rightly we should be. I mean, what we're doing for young people day in, day out is very, very special, and that should be respected. So I think that is a big positive. And I guess the bit we haven't talked about is the climate. So as a geographer, I'm gonna throw that in because in the winter it's wonderful. We're temperatures in the mid-20s, the sun's shining nearly every day, and it's a wonderful climate. We're now moving into that time of the year where it gets more challenging. And I'd say the biggest challenge of life working in the Middle East are the hot summer months. And people say, well, you must get used to it. I don't know. Do you ever get used to the cold and darkness of January and February in the UK? I don't know if you do. I'm not sure you ever get used to the heat and the humidity that we often experience in the Middle East in the summer months. It is tough, but I'm not everything. I think everywhere in the world has some challenges with the climate that you might be in for at least part of the year.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. That's lovely to have those insights and so on. And I know we've got more questions, but we're not going to have time to answer them. There are questions about recruitment and retention. I think you've done a very good job, actually, all of you, of encouraging people to apply for your school.
Please, it's brilliant.
That's wonderful. Yes, yeah. So I know Danny's going to come on just a moment and wrap it all up, but I'd like to say thank you to all of you. So Danny, over to you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Helen, Tracy, Vanessa, and Kai. What an insightful conversation, hearing your perspectives and experiences. It's really interesting to see leaders tune in from all over the world as well. We had comments from China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, the US, and of course, other countries in the Middle East. So thank you all so much. As Dr. Helen, also you said, we had so many great questions come in that we unfortunately couldn't get to because of time. But if we weren't able to respond to your question, or if you've got perhaps any other questions, would like to connect with our speakers, please send an email to marketing@guesseducation.com. We'll do our very best to get back to you after the webinar. You'll also be redirected to a short survey once we end. So please tell us what you thought and if there are any topics you'd like to hear about. So that we can cover them in the near future. Thank you again to our sponsor, Kinderpedia, an all-in-one digital solution for school management and communication. They've got a complimentary ebook for webinar attendees titled Leadership for Education. We'll just quickly push a pop-up on the screen now so you can download your copy. And if you want to enjoy the webinar all over again, you can do so, as we'll be uploading it to our GESS Education website and YouTube channel and sending it out to all attendees by email. A massive, massive thank you to our panel and also you, our audience, for tuning in. We'll be announcing our upcoming webinar for May very soon, so please make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter, follow us on social media, and visit guesseducation.com to stay informed of our latest events. And also, you can read some really insightful articles that we publish on behalf of our amazing education community, including ones from our panelists today. Until next time, please take care and have a lovely Eid al-Fitr. Thank you all, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you.